Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Dalmar, and today we're going to talk about, I think, a very interesting subject, science and Judaism, or I say and because a lot of times there'll be science versus Judaism or religion, because the two, some people think the two can't get along together. So I actually been doing a lot of research, and I wanted to share with our audience here. And this is a special book. Actually, I had to ask the library that we're always thankful for Bethlehem Library for using their studios. And obviously, it's a library in itself, so you can take out books, to say the least. And actually, I dug up a few books. This one I wanted to talk about Judaism and the theology of Sir Isaac Newton. Well, let's talk about from the beginning. So Isaac Newton is probably, and many people have considered him the greatest scientist in the world, maybe known world for the last 1,000 years. Who knows who was there a few thousand years ago? But obviously there's so many things that Isaac Newton came up with optics and gravity. Everybody knows these major ideas, which was really, if we could say, because he was the beginning of the science revolution. Not that there were no scientists beforehand, but it really got things moving in the late 1600s and 1700s, and then people started learning more and more, and then we got even 100 years later to the Industrial Revolution. So he was really the beginning, so to speak, of scientific thought. So again, people would say he's one of the greatest scientists that ever lived. Now, very, very interesting is obviously that they wanted to look up his writings or his private writings, and the history, as people do. They look at people's memoirs after they passed away and their notes, to see, what really was making them tick, and maybe they had deeper ideas they never published and spoke about. So obviously they did that with Isaac Newton also, and lo and behold, very, very interesting, super interesting actually, that he had many, many writings in Hebrew. That's where I come in with the Judaic. So really, that's why I had to do extra research in it, because they really didn't, they don't tell that in the grammar books, like he was really into religion, because it was science. And they just want to say, nowadays in science, and you take biology, they're not going to say, look how beautiful this plant is, or the planet, or, all the flowers, or the tens of thousands of species. Oh, thank God for how great a creation. You'll never hear those words in science classes. Never. In the grammar school, high school, college, they'll never say those kind of words. And on and all kinds of scientific things. What a beautiful universe that we have. It works and we live. Of course, it's like I always say, I know people argue, well, there's problems in the world, there's floods and there's earthquakes. I'm not saying that it's a perfect world, but on the other hand, for the most part, we're all living, most people are living in some way or another. We're not being too hot and too cold and being destroyed from meteorites. Bottom line, the world is vast and beautiful. You're looking on it in a very positive aspect. And where does religion come in? They just, most part, people don't talk about religion, and that's why I said it's a very, very big issue, science versus religion. Can you be a scientist? Which obviously it's whole subjects, biology, chemistry, physics, on and on and on, which is just very logical. They have experience. They don't go hocus pocus. There's obviously experiments, a scientific method. So who needs religion? I could figure it out for myself. I'll take a biology course and figure it out and maybe come up with something new if I'm really smart. And who needs God? So this really was the thought for the last few hundred years. But as I say many times, and any real scientist will say that, there's so much that you don't understand. There's so much phenomena that we can't either document or figure out. And maybe that's where you could see the hand of God. Truth of the matter is even the nature is a part of God, because it's such a perfect world in certain senses. I mean, spring comes and the winter, the plants die off, and the spring, everything's re-nurtured and comes about. So it's a very, looking at it through those eyes, It's a very, very, very beautiful and incredible world. People are into nature and they understand different species, different climates, and for the most part, everything works. It's a beautiful, beautiful world. But on a deeper level, you could say that, well, how did it get that way? Think deeper a little bit. Yeah, it's a beautiful world, and they leave it at that. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Beautiful world, getting all the species, like I say, the beautiful colors, and the different geology that's around, on and on and on. And people just could, they know themselves. You go sightseeing and different natural phenomena. Incredible, incredible. But the next step is, who created all that? How did it happen? So again, like I say, science will stop and just say it's great, it's beautiful, fine, it's interesting, it's deep. It will change the chemistry of this thing or the other thing, change the flow of a river. We could do a lot of things, which that's absolutely true. But, who made it? So if you think really into it, there has to be a plan. And that's one of the ideas where the Talmud says that, again, just a few lines in the Talmud, but everything is so deep. And some philosopher was arguing with one of the rabbis, again, it's documented 2,000 years ago, and he says, prove to me that God exists. Which is a good question people still have thousands of years later. And he says that, there's an inkwell. Again, they didn't have big pens in those days. There's an inkwell, obviously with a quill, and there's a scroll there. So there's writing next to it. And you know how it happened? It happened. A wind came and blew over the inkwell, and it splattered and made this document. So the philosopher said, "Well, that's the biggest, the crediblest, dumbest thing I ever did here." Wind blow over. It could blow over an inkwell, but to be perfect lines and to be perfect letters and to make sense of it, they say it's craziness. He says, look at what you just said. Here, you just can't understand how an inkwell would just pour over and just come into a perfect document. Actually, people have worked on that idea. I mean, and I've heard it once that they put a monkey in front of a typewriter, doesn't know how to spell a word, and it just, got it to just knock the keys down. And they just say to get even one sentence, because you have to, like the, T, then an H, and an E, space, and the big ball, make up a sentence. One line of a book, how many words are there, whatever it is, 8 words, 10 words in a line, and with the special spaces, and that it should make sense. Big ball, not some gibberish or something like that. And for a monkey, meaning just accident, just a monkey to knock the keys, would take like 1 trillion years for just to get one normal line of a sentence. And so obviously the world, like anybody looks at it, so much more complicated than one line of a book. Again, just studying the biology and the chemistry, how it works together, and the seasons goes on and on and on. I mean, anybody has any inkling of science sees how everything's in perfect order. There's rotation, it's the right tilt. I mean, we really literally should be talking for hours about how great science says how the world is. I mean, you learn to yourself, I'm sure, in classes. In any case, to say that it just banged and like an inkwell just blew up and turned into a perfect situation is totally ludicrous. I mean, once you think about it for just even a few seconds, that it just plots together and we have such a beautiful, wonderful world that we have. In any case, that's the way the scenario, science always looked, science versus religion. But obviously I want to say science and religion, that science does complement religion. God created the world. It's the beginning of the creation of the book of the Bible. And you could see the hand of God really in everything. And really science, because other things you say, well, I'm just walking on the street, I don't see God. I see a building. But someone who's into science sees how beautiful and coordinated everything really is, the scientific rules. if there's, you throw down a bunch of balls or jacks onto a floor, then you wouldn't get a pattern. You say, well, that's the way it works. No, the next time you do it, it's going to be another. Maybe go to Vegas also or whatever. Any chance, they say if they get the right number, it's a chance. The ball, you spin it around, you're going to get another. If there's another kind of chance, obviously it won't be the same. Vegas wouldn't be a business. In any case, the same thing with the world. If you would just say, yeah, it's blowing around and doing its thing, how could you have a scientific rule to say that? So there wouldn't be any rules. It would just be chance. That's all. It's this way today. It's that way tomorrow. The sun comes up today. It doesn't come up tomorrow. It goes the other way. Whatever. You could get the point. And that is just that there has to be a God making all these rules. Now, let's even get back to the original idea with Isaac Newton. So Isaac Newton, even though they try to whitewash his, and they do, because I had investigated, and really you don't hear about it really in science class at all, but he was really, really into religion. I mean, obviously science says he was a great scientist, so that's a non-issue. We all know that, but they try to take away this idea that he was looking at the Hebrew. Now, it's even not just that he knew Hebrew. I mean, Hebrew is a nice language. It's the holy language. Torah is written in the Bible's written originally in Hebrew, and that's why you so many different, deeper ideas can be read in the Hebrew. I always say when people learn, they say, hey, there's enough English books out there to read a lifetime. And really there are. I'm a little different than I was growing up. Me, I always kid, I'm 29 years old, but maybe I'm not. And in any case, that when I was young, there was not that many English Judaic books around. And now, just even every time I go to New York and see the books, there's always new books out, new translations. And a person's right that they could see different kind of English books and last a lifetime. So what they argue, what do you have to learn Hebrew? So really hand in hand. It's not like you take off a few years and learn Hebrew and then go into Judaism, look into Judaism, but at the same time delve into Hebrew. Why then? Besides that, it is Lashon HaKodesh. It's called a holy language. It's very, very deep in its own right, its holiness. On the other hand, that there's hints by changing the letter, exchanging the letter, the numerical values of the letters, that you can get a deeper appreciation of what the Torah really is. So that's very important to understand the Hebrew. And Isaac Newton understood this, that there were Latin translations of the Bible, so he could have just read the Bible in Latin. Why did he have to trouble himself to learn the Hebrew? And many people did also. He wasn't the only one. But it came out of vogue nowadays. I always say, that people who are literate, 100 years ago, just Abraham Lincoln, what did they read? They read the Bible. They all knew the Bible. How do you read something and not know the Bible? That was for hundreds of years. Now, and I don't know, I'm just projecting that, you go to a university and ask a freshman class how many people have read the Bible. Maybe there's Christian universities, I know no more, but just a regular secular, like SUNY university, how many people have read the Bible? And I don't know the number, but I could just almost say it's be very, very few percent that have read the Bible. And 100 years ago and even more, if you were literate, you read the Bible. So in any case, it wasn't just that Isaac Newton read the Bible, but a lot of people did, and just to get even a deeper appreciation, that he did he did understand Hebrew, and he wrote things in Hebrew also. So a very deeper idea, just to give you a taste. If you appreciate Isaac Newton, which you should, because he's a great scientist, you should appreciate other things that he was into. And he actually made a diagram of the tabernacle in the desert, which is all documented in the Bible. So he had, like I said, he translated and he knew it, and he drew a diagram. Now here's a person, like he's a genius, and such a scientific genius, and here he was devoting so much time, you can only imagine, So I say it wasn't just one page, there was slews of pages that they found written into Hebrew and diagrams of the tabernacle. Spent so much of his time in the temple. Now, what idea is, which he chanced on, and he learned from somewhere, they didn't exactly say from whom, but I'm filling you in with it, is that, again, people read the second half of the book of Exodus and they talk about the building of the tabernacle. And everybody tells me, oh, now it's boring, Rabbi. You know, I'm not an architect, a rector set, a Lego set. I don't care about building this many cubits here and that many cubits there. You know, there were so many interesting stories up till the middle of the Exodus. You have the Joseph story, the forefathers and all their stories, on, and then in the beginning Exodus is the story of the Exodus, which is super interesting. And all of a sudden you get to a dead end, so to speak, that they say, oh, now they're going to tell about building the tabernacle in the desert. Oh, now it's the boring part. So I constantly get these issues, and that's why I'm trying to give you an appreciation, is just that the Mishkan wasn't all right. You build a building, you have to meditate and contemplate why it's this many stories and that many. I mean, again, an architect would appreciate it, but the common man, all right, it's a nice building, fine. But the Mishkan was the tabernacle. They're not just bothering you to learn to be an architect, because not everybody's an architect anyway. They're actually, the way that it's configured, the tabernacle is a diagram how the universe is made. It's a very deep idea. It's a very Jewish deep idea. And Isaac Newton figured that out also. He learned it from somewhere, and that's why he was so into, obviously he was a genius with the gravity. He'll think about the universe. You can only imagine what he was thinking about. On the other hand, that he was trying to get even deeper understanding of the universe. That's why I'm saying Albert Einstein also. He said, well, he figured out the atom and energy, but he was, these people think in global, not beyond global, universal ideas. You know, the whole, why the universe was made. These people had incredible minds, and not just one little thing. They tinkered around and made one discovery, and you know, they got their pension. I mean, making fun because they didn't in the 1600s. He did get a university position, but their minds are so fertile that they just thinking about even bigger things. So he wanted to get a picture of the blueprints of the universe, and someone told him, which is true though, that the whole Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert, was construed exactly to the proportions in the how the universe was made, and that's what he was really delving into. What he really tried to figure out, I haven't seen it. I didn't read his books in the original. Like I say, I've been trying to get as many books as I could on the subject that's written about it. Not that many books, there's 3 books I've read about it, and just to get deeper and deeper into what Isaac Newton's ideas were. Now, many times he was, just again maybe configure the, frame the situation or the history of it. Like I said, Sir Isaac Newton lived in the 1600s into the 1700s. Now, and of course, we know he lived in England. Now, the truth of the matter is, and it's an interesting, trivial idea for the Jewish history at least, Europe had so many different countries, number one, and so many different Jews, that what was the last country in Europe to allow Jews to settle there? People say Russia, if you ask somebody in Poland, because they were so anti-Semitic there. But the answer is England. It wasn't until Sir Oliver Cromwell in the 1600s that allowed Jews to settle into England. They were there, but in the 1200s they were thrown out and they weren't allowed back until the 1600s. That's a very interesting question, issue, because you always think of Britain, our friend in America, and they're so liberal, but I don't know how liberal compared to this idea is. In any case, the bottom line for Isaac Newton is there weren't that many Jewish people around, or rabbis, of course. He was a learned person. He just wasn't going to ask anybody. Of great rabbis to communicate. Nowadays you communicate, you Skype and you telephone and you fax and your book. Obviously you're in England. It actually says that about his bio that he really never even traveled around. He was always, his whole life was in a very small circle around London and where he lived. So he really didn't travel around like you say, maybe go to Europe and travel there. People were traveling obviously in the 1600s. I mean, already America was discovered. They were going over the ocean and settled in America, but he didn't go too far, so he didn't have that kind of communication with rabbis or other people, but he was reading books. So it was very, very interesting that he came to these ideas by himself, and maybe obviously other, like I say, he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of, Hebrew scholars. It's very interesting on that note. I mean, Hebrew, you say, well, Hebrew, if you're Israeli, you read Hebrew. If you're a rabbi, you read the Hebrew. But even it's very interesting, again, in 1600s, like I'm saying, that the insignia of Yale University, one of the top universities in the country, to say the least, in the world, has an insignia. I don't know if people, because they can't read Hebrew, they probably don't know it. It says Urim v'Tumim in Hebrew letters. Urim v'Tumim was the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, that would you'd ask questions to, and it would light up the breastplate with different letters to tell you exactly what the answer is. So again, that's what I'm saying. You're talking about the 1600s, that you had a very deep appreciation. Number one for the Bible, number two for the Hebrew in it, because it was very deep, and scholars really did know and tried to learn the Hebrew, just maybe because they appreciated the Bible. Like I said before, I don't know how many people appreciate the Bible. Obviously, people are religious people, they do, but if people are secular, they don't even bother with it. And that's really a shame, because obviously I appreciate the Bible, and I think there's something to offer to every person, not only in their morals and ethics, which we talk about many times, but like I say, on a scientific level, and I'm not a scientist, but surely Isaac Newton was, that there's very deep ideas that you can get in the either in the Bible, in the Talmud, and people have written about these things, scholars, and they've seen ideas that they really saw it mimicked, like geometry and things like that, trigonometry in the Gemara. Obviously, addition, you can see yourself in subtraction is already in the Bible. How many people lived here and how many more people live there, and here's the total. So you can learn even the basics for sure. You can see that yourself. But I've talked to mathematicians, and they said, yes, there's some really, interesting ideas, especially maybe in the Talmud when they talk about dimensions of things and they talk about deep ideas. You can really get mathematical and scientific ideas from it. And probably we're just scratching the surface, just like Isaac Newton was trying to do, is just how deep really these secrets are. Now, how deep he got into, I'm going to have to do more research. Maybe he did it. Maybe he just was wondering about it, and he saw the idea behind it, he was studying it, and maybe he never got into some really deeper ideas. But who knows? Maybe he did, and, again, they just didn't look into his writings. They, just like I said before, whitewashed it. Oh, it's Hebrew, it's unscientific, it's Bible studies. What does that have to do with science? They don't even talk about it because they don't want to diminish his character as of being being a great scientist. What's he delving into religion for? So it's a major idea that really still has to be learned in, and that's why I wanted to delve into it, because again, the main idea again is that it shouldn't be taught, which really it is, and that's what people have to understand. It's not science versus religion. If you're religious, you can't really be a scientist, and if you're a scientist, you really can't be a religious person. That really isn't so true at all. It's, if anything, on the contrary. That's what we were saying. People have to learn to appreciate that God made the world, and he made it, again, it wasn't hocus pocus. There's scientific mythology in that. Many times I call Kabbalah, which I teach the Jewish mysticism, they say how the world was created. I sometimes say it's like almost mystical engineering. Maybe it's a little bit not nice to say about engineers, it's about religious, but in a way it is. This is the God did have a method how to create the world. It's not like, oh, God says be religious, on the other hand, okay, be a scientist and do your own thing. The world was created by God. He created in a very obviously scientific way. All you have to do is see the biology, chemistry, physics, etc., etc. It's in a very, very methodical way. In a deep way of appreciation is to delve into it. Sometimes we cannot, understand these things, and we have to look at science to understand how God did create the world. Nothing wrong with that, and if anything, it's right. It's a beautiful thing to understand how deep this beautiful world is. Nothing wrong with science. That's what we're saying also. A person religious, oh, you shouldn't learn science. No one's saying that. But again, appreciation, how they can complement each other, that's very, very important, that to understand that. And I think it would be better for, maybe even deeper. I mean, a little bit making my own statements. I'm not a scientist, but I think just like what Sir Isaac Newton was trying to do, is just to look to even the deeper aspect. Now they're looking for black holes, the end of the universe. They're setting up spacecrafts in order to understand the world, which is beautiful, fine. But maybe they would even get even better insights of, the end product of, if they see exactly, if they say this is how God created the world, if they have some kind of understanding in it, and then they have the answer, and they say, well, let's approach the scientific method to understand as much as we can from that method. So that's really an important point. Many of the times the Rambam Maimonides he was a doctor, when medicine obviously is science in its own right. He had to learn from medicine from other people. He learned many of his Judaic ideas. When the moon would appear or not appear, that's another commandment, the new moon. And he says he went to the Greeks, which means the college, the universities, to understand these things, to complement his Torah studies. So that's, and the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitch Rebbe Tanya, was the basic work of Chabad Hasidus. He just says that you are allowed to learn secular studies if it will help you to, one, make a living, but number two, just to understand the deeper aspects of what Torah is all about, if it's going to help your Judaic understanding. So really what we see is from our great scholars, Maimonides, the first Lubavitch Rebbe, that a person can use science in order to understand the universe, which the universe is godly also, the way God made it, and appreciate his great works. You understand, if someone could make a, you say, wow, maybe some computer guy must have been a genius. You say that, or like we said before, an architect, wow, who thought of this plan? The guy must have been so great that he thought of such a plan. So just seeing the end results, you understand who the person is, or some idea. You can appreciate at least how great that person was, who thought of the idea. How great scientists, they go to the moon. What kind of people are they to understand it? This is an incredible idea. So when you look at the universe, wow, what kind of being created a universe like this? Sun and the moon, galaxies, light years, etc., etc. How incredible. Stars, sun. How incredible our universe is, and appreciated, and it should be appreciated. It is all part of Judaism. God did make this world, and understand, well, if he created the world, how great is he? So in any case, hopefully we enlightened you, not the enlightenment era of Sir Isaac Newton, but now enlighten even further that science is not contradictory to religion, it's only a complementary to religion, and I think Isaac Newton really had that idea, and it should be looked into even a little bit more. Thank you very much.